feel like they're invincible. They feel like they know everything, but yet they don't know anything.
And then we see a lot of anxiety, depression around this age.
Every time I tell them something medically, they challenge me. They're like,
yeah.
"You don't know," and I'm like, and then they'll go and like ChatGPT, and then they'll come back at me with like a bunch of things.
There's actually 3 parts of lifestyle modification. It's diet, it's exercise, and then the last part is habit setting.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of What the Health at Epic.
All right, yeah, we're going to be talking about a critical core time in life. We're talking about the Roaring 20s.
The 20s. So maybe I'll start since you always keep trying to start and, and let me talk. It's
right.
Childhood all over again. So the 20s. When you say like, where do we start? So like,
your 20s?
Oh man, oh, barely. When you look at the 20s, I mean, the 20s is a time frame in life where individuals they're just kind of breaking free from their parents and starting to getting more independence, and it's that second decade of life where they feel like they're invincible. They feel like they know everything, but yet they don't know anything. And is that you out there?
And people probably are like, all right, what do these old dudes know about the 20s? Well, number one, we're physicians who see all ages.
Right.
But number two, we have kids in the 20s.
Right.
So we're reliving
the
20s through our 20-year-olds.
Yeah, where I'm constantly challenged, even as as I'm sure you as well. I mean, anytime the kiddos, and I still call them kiddos, obviously, because they're still always my kids. But like, every time I tell them something medically, they challenge me. They're you don't know, and I'm like, and then they'll go and like ChatGPT, and then they'll come back at me with like a bunch of things. And
isn't that something? Just like not too long ago, it was Dr. Google. Now we're talking ChatGPT with this crew.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So
yes, and so it's a lot of still behaviors of risky type of behaviors that still feeling that sense of invincibility, where like they feel like hey, I can do whatever I want. I can. They feel like they know everything.
Sure.
And they're still experimenting with a lot of things. They're starting to still dabble in things and experiment with things that are either sex, drugs, and all the other things, and whatever, and the relationships, and trying to figure out like more long-term relationships. Still a lot of the ups and downs, but again, from a health perspective, not a whole lot of issues, and feel pretty good because they haven't had enough time to really start feeling any ill impacts.
Well, let's hold it down. Let's go over some of the topics that we'd probably want to go over today around the 20s, because that we see and we've experienced, and all of our patients, and I'm sure the audience is looking at, okay, hey, how is this going to be relevant to me? I'm in my 20s, or I have a child who's in their 20s, and how do I coach them to get through this challenging time, as you mentioned, that's kind of up and down.
Yeah, so it's a sense of trying to break free independence from parents, and really separating themselves, and in the process of doing that, realizing that maybe they can't afford things as much, but they're leaning towards things that also, like from a social perspective, they've definitely veered more towards social and friend relationship is more than parent family relationships. They're breaking away from there. A lot of the struggles that come along with that. So
maybe the first topic we can talk about is around the social dynamics as well as mental health that comes along with that, and how the brain is evolving at this age range, this decade. And we can go into that first in terms of like, all right, our first topic will be around some of the mental health things that we see, and the social dynamics that correlate with it, and how are people kind of making those relationships. Because now you're out of high school, you may be in college, or now you're in a workforce. You have all these new social areas that you're involved in, and those areas cause a lot of grief because the brain is evolving out of this adolescent phase into this adult phase, but you're not really one or the other yet.
Right.
And it's how do you cope with that? And then we see a lot of anxiety, depression around this age, how to then cope with parents telling you this because they're still acting or treating you like an adolescent. Now you're thinking, I'm more of an adult and I have all these new responsibilities, whether it's in college, grad school, or workforce. And those stressors how do they cope with that? Like, what are some of the things that we
Yeah.
see that we can kind of suggest to everybody?
Yeah, and some of the things also to along your point is, there's a different phase of adolescence, and when we look at late adolescence, where a lot of people don't realize is that the prefrontal cortex, which is essentially the front part of the brain, especially in the
Put on the bow ties, guys. We're going on the whiteboard.
going in. So again, when we start talking about the prefrontal cortex, especially the right prefrontal cortex, which is one of the last parts to really develop, that's the part that does a lot of the executive thinking, and that doesn't develop in fully in most people until they're in their mid to upper 20s.
Right.
And that's the part where, again, so you're in an adult body, you feel like you're an adult, you're doing everything adult wise, but yet your brain hasn't still fully developed to the point where doing all the executive functional thinking stuff. And then when we talk about the emotional part of it, now it's like, again, you're separating away from family. It's more you're developing your own self, but with relationships, trying to get into more serious relationships, and it's just and then moving on into life, whether it's college, grad school, or into more of setting yourself up into even potentially even getting into a family and more permanent long-term relationships, and a lot of those elements from the psychological aspect of developing that part of the brain, and also developing those tight bonds. But it's also a time where there's a lot of volatility. There's a lot of volatility between like parent-child relationship. There's a lot of volatility between like peer-to-peer relationships, and you're going from like a lot of different people around your inner circle to kind of honing into narrowing down to inner circle. And so there's a lot of that element.
So how do we coach the audience around? Okay, in the next few minutes here, we can tell them about, okay, when you're gonna be facing these things. So be aware of it. It's happening to many people, and it's probably happening because the brain is not, to your point, again, like my 20-year-olds, when they come to me and they're like, Dad, this, Mom doesn't listen. And I don't tell them, your brain hasn't really evolved yet. You're still an adolescent.
Right.
So we want to make sure that, again, we're giving them coaching tips of, all right, take a deep breath. You're going to have to talk to them a little bit differently. Ask them. And the biggest step I say to them is start communicating with them about, I'm transitioning now to an adult. I want you to start acting that way with me. And then do that with your friends and social circles as well, so that they're aware of it.
Right. And also we can maybe transition. It's also an important time where even though you're feeling invincible and feeling like you can do everything, we see a lot of things these days in regards to with marijuana. We see a lot of things with tobacco and with the vaping and cigarettes and alcohol, because now you're essentially, in that adult phase of your life where you can do whatever you want and however you want. And a lot of people start to kind of veer towards some of those things.
So that's a great point. So now, we just talked about social situations and mental health and those kinds of things. And along that track, maybe it's a good time for us to segue into the next topic, which is going to be around, well, now I'm an adult and I'm developing new social circles. And part of that is I get to party and I get to do these things, and I get to live some of these things that I have access to that I didn't when I was a teenager. Yeah. And I don't have to necessarily listen to my parents, or I don't even live with them anymore. So
right. So some of the things that with just to level set with marijuana, when we talk about and not to get too technical and put on my bow tie with the THC and the CBD, and people don't realize that marijuana has a significant impact on a young, immature, growing, developing brain. So it actually can decrease synaptic firing and the potentials in regards to some of the receptors that happen in the prefrontal cortex. It actually will inhibit growth and will inhibit firing in those neurons, and actually, even if anything, can even cause atrophy. So that's one thing that a lot of young people who are nowadays, you see things about, medicinal marijuana everywhere. So that's one thing. With vaping, with nicotine, people don't realize that from straight cigarette smoking to vaping, there's almost an 80-fold increase amount of nicotine that they're getting with this liquid form of as far as nicotine that they're getting.
Sure.
In regards to the significant impact and the injury and the harm that causes to young lungs, but lungs at any age, really, not even just being young lungs. So to the fact that there are certain conditions for some individuals who can cause some serious harm to their lungs, even permanent scarring and damage. When we talk about things like VOLI, which is vape associated lung injury. So I don't know if you want to maybe elaborate a little more on some of that.
Sure. So again, they call it the Roaring 20s for a reason. Now we're getting alcohol, we're getting to drugs, we're getting to vaping. And this is something that comes up a lot. We hear many people talk about, well, what's the safe amount to vape? And obviously, there is no safe amount
Right.
to do that, but it really goes back to, and then you're starting to educate them to these types of things like, okay, yes, it can impede or slow down the neurodevelopment that's happening, the last part of neurodevelopment that's happening, even though there is neuroplasticity, meaning that the brain can still grow and improve, but there really isn't a safe amount that, especially in this era, but we know it's going to happen. So again, and we also know that people, have come up to us and they talked about, well, I heard that, well, I was smoking in my adolescence and I want to come off of it. Is this a good way for me to come off of like cigarette smoking or some other stuff, or even I want to come down on how much I was smoking in terms of, or taking in marijuana. Um, and so it has been used that way, clinically it has been used to be able to then say, okay, well, this is a way for us to then wean you down. And used in certain situations, yeah. But to your point, it still can cause, severe lung damage. It can cause problems with neurodevelopment. And so we want to still make sure that everybody knows that it's not recommended at all. But there are certain things, if talked about with your physician, when you come in, see us as a provider, we definitely can work on some of that stuff.
Yeah. So certainly, it's from a social perspective, it's narrowing the social sphere for people in their 20s from doing things and experimenting and feeling more like as an adult at this point and being able to do whatever you want. It's like we see a lot of issues with alcohol, with smoking, whether it's marijuana or nicotine.
Mhm.
Also, some of the things from because of the fact that people in their 20s are generally pretty healthy, we still recommend that you get your physical exams done, start establishing yourself with a medical home. It's important, even though you're in 20s and your body's pretty healthy generally. It's still important to get in and get your physical exams done, even if it's just on a yearly basis.
So that's a good point. Maybe now is a good time to talk about that. So let's talk about some of because this age range, these individuals, again, they feel relatively healthy for the most part, but they're broke, right? They're just starting their families, or they're starting work. They're still students. So maybe we can now move into maybe some health hacks that we can talk about in this age. That in their 20s, what can they do as a health hack to improve their health, but being broke? So we can potentially touch on a few things around that.
Trying to identify foods that are healthy snacks, veggies, fruit, things like that, and on a budget. It's certainly oftentimes one of the things that's not top of mind for somebody that age range. But there's certainly ways of being able to, eat healthy foods, healthy snacks,
Mhm.
foods from all the major grains, and containing things in a smaller portion as well, and like training yourself on how to keep things in small portions is very important at this stage as well. Starting to get into habits of like the routine sleep cycles, and trying to make sure that you're getting into some routine exercise cycles at least, if nothing else, 3 to 4 times a week. It's important, even if it's just 30-minute sessions. It's important.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So it's funny because we were just talking about earlier off camera how that, again, it's back to lifestyle modifications, and you don't have to be rich to, again, choose those right habits. Like you just mentioned, again, you don't need a lot of money to make sure that you're getting enough exercise, make sure that you getting the proper nutrition. And then of course, the last part of lifestyle that you don't is just creating the habits.
Mhm.
So people underestimate that third part, or they never even talk about it in terms of there's actually three parts of lifestyle modification. It's diet, it's exercise, and then the last part is habit setting. And this is a perfect time to do that. Again, if you do that correctly now, then you're going to go into your 30s and 40s and be successful, because this is a great time for you to start setting those habits. So sleep habits, which are huge and very important at this age, because we'll talk about that next. It's how sleep and is affected at this age and with the developing brain. So sleep habits, then your exercise habits, which again, if you can't afford a gym, that just means get up, body weight exercises. We
Outdoors as
do
well. I mean,
two
it's a great time
2 to 3 times a week, resistance training, including just body weight, push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, those kinds of things, body squats. And then, yeah, you want to make sure that you're getting at least 4 times a week some kind of low intensity steady state exercise, what they call it LISS, LISS. So low intensity steady state exercise, getting the heart rate up there to moderate, which means you're breathing like this. You can still have a conversation, but you're breathing a lot fast and hard. That's how you know you're at the right pace
Sure.
for that. and you want to make sure that you're getting minimum 15 minutes, but more likely you're going to want to get about 45 minutes for that. If you set those habits now, you're solid. And again, you don't need to be, you can do that on a budget.
The 20s are a time where, again, from a healthcare perspective, it's oftentimes we don't see a whole lot of individuals in the office in their 20s unless they've got some acute thing going on. And the acute thing is usually, an injury, a cough, or cold, whatever. But the idea being is like, really want to emphasize to it's still important to make sure that you're, getting in and establishing a medical home with a primary care physician, getting your yearly physical exams, developing those habits, as you're working through trying to figure out, relationships and, breaking yourself away from like the family ties and getting out into the world, exploring with a lot of things, making sure that when you are exploring, try to avoid exploring too much with things that could be harmful and or have like, lifelong consequences and or sometimes some things that might be hard to get away from as well. And then it's, again, developing the proper habits, whether it's sleep, exercise, daily, just as far as all the routine things and like food and nutrition, all those kind of things are important.
Yeah. And maybe, this would be a good time to talk about, since you're mentioning this in terms of getting a provider, getting set up, because again, now you're going from, I was being seen by, somebody as a kid and now I'm an adult. Do I stay with them? If it's a family practice physician, or if like we are internal medicine and pediatrics, just continue that relationship. They know you, you know them, you're comfortable with them for sure. If not, you're going to want to transition into more adult medicine at this point, someone who can actually give you those kinds of tips and tricks. One thing that's a little bit different about us in our practice, when you're out there looking for what we call a medical home, is that we don't look at it from a yearly physical, because yearly physical, we'll see you again in a year, but all of the stuff we just talked about is happening all year long. You want to probably come in more regularly, set up those conversations, and come in and discuss those things as they come up.
Yeah.
Because we get all kinds of interesting questions, just, off the wall things, like, like the vape thing and how often can I, and hey, can I come down because I used to be on this and that. We get things in terms of like, hey, I was partying real hard in my early 20s and now I'm trying to back down, and how can I do that? And what about, 0% beer? If you start talking about that and you're like, okay, well, yeah, you can, but, a lot of glucose in them. It's still going to be a sugar thing. And if, somebody who is obese and overweight, you got to be careful with that, because now you cut out the alcohol, which is great if that's your, that's what you're trying to accomplish. But then hey, I want to make sure that with this though, I'm also staying healthy. And those are reasons why you want to come in, establish a good relationship with a physician and provider, and then come in on a regular basis, because you're going to have these questions that come up and you don't necessarily want to always ask ChatGPT or Dr. Google for that.
For sure. And even like, even just mentioning from a wellness perspective, there are even vaccines that are generally recommended to be given in your 20s, including things like meningitis vaccines and HPV vaccines or things like that. A lot of people don't think about like that. There are the annual vaccines, which we recommend, like the flu shots and the COVIDs and all that kind of stuff. But there are also like routine vaccines that we recommend for helping prevent things like meningitis and HPV, which is a common cause of cervical cancer. So there's a lot of reasons to, things in the 20s. I know generally most people feel healthy and they feel like there's not really a whole lot of need to like be seen by physicians.
Sure.
But certainly the 20s is still one of those time ranges where like there's plenty there to have. Like,
a lot of tips and tricks we can go over and discuss during that period of time. Again, but that's important to kind of establish that medical home, come in on a regular basis, do those things that, you're probably embarrassed to talk about with your friends and family, unless you're one of those people who like, you share too much, but that's okay too. We just got to make sure that we're there and we can listen to you. Not
how many times we've been in an exam room where someone's like, spilling their guts in. I'm like, listen, I'm not a priest. I just need to know like that stuff from medical. Right. Okay. I was not here for confession, man.
Or they sugarcoat you're like, listen, I've heard it all. Just like, right. I can tell you
like, listen, there's only one way this could have happened. So, but right. Yeah, cool. All right. So we will see you guys back. Another episode of
What the Hell?
What the Hell?